The House passed a bipartisan border funding bill Thursday, providing nearly $4.6 billion to ease the humanitarian crisis at the southern border. It comes after Senate Republicans rejected the House's version of the bill, a version that would have guaranteed higher standards of care for detained migrant families. Manuel Bojorquez reports.
The situation at the border is a challenge to the conscience of America.
The House of Representatives passed the Senate version of the bill, which would allocate $1.1 billion to improve border facilities and almost $3 billion to care for migrant children, though the White House did pledge to notify lawmakers within 24 hours if a migrant child dies in government custody and limit stays of children at temporary facilities to 90 days. Facilities like this one in Homestead, Florida. It's the nation's largest and only privately run shelter for unaccompanied minors, with approximately 2,500 kids aged 13 to 17. The facility is not subject to state inspections. Lawyers who have been inside filed a motion last month alleging prison-like rules. A 13-year-old Salvadoran told an attorney, "You can't share food, you can't hug or touch anyone." A 16-year-old Guatemalan who had been there 138 days said, "Nobody here has explained to me why I have not been released."
The children were in despair.
Hope Fry was part of the team that went in.
We do not need to detain children this way. Children can be promptly released and handled within the existing shelter system.
But federal officials say shelters are currently holding 13,500 children, and some shelters are beyond 90% capacity. The company the government pays to run Homestead, Caliburn, calls allegations of prison-like conditions inaccurate, adding in a statement, "The physical and emotional well-being of each and every child is the shelter's primary concern."
Manuel Bojorquez joins us now from Homestead, Florida. So, Manny, some candidates who are in Florida for the debates have been able to speak to advocates of the migrants in these shelters. What have they learned about the conditions and how have they reacted?
Well, they've been able to at least peer into the facility. You can see behind me, there's not much you can see from the outside, but some of the advocates and protesters here have established step ladders where you can look above the fence and see some of the children when they're out to play here. So many of those candidates over the last few days have come out here. Bernie Sanders was one today to basically denounce what they consider the mistreatment, if you will, of the Trump administration by some of these children. Of course, the departments that run these shelters, these emergency shelters, have argued that they're doing the best they can with the sheer number of children that are still streaming across the border.
And Manny, on another topic, U.S. asylum officers have asked a federal appeals court to block the Trump administration from implementing its Remain in Mexico policy. What reasons are they citing?
It's a pretty remarkable move to have asylum officers themselves, in a way, rebuke the Trump administration's policy of remaining in Mexico. This was actually the union that filed that motion. Their argument is that it violates U.S. and international law. And it's controversial, the policy, because many immigrant rights advocates say that it endangers some of the asylum seekers to essentially return them to Mexico and make them await those proceedings there. They say they're not necessarily going back to safe conditions in Mexico, but the Trump administration has tried to really negotiate and get Mexico to accept more people onto this program. Now up to 15,000 asylum seekers who have claimed asylum here in the U.S. and are now having to wait on the other side of the border. The Trump administration negotiated that in the last round of tariff talks with Mexico to get more people to go down there, essentially arguing that Mexico needs to do more to accommodate the influx of asylum seekers and more to stop them from reaching the U.S. border. But it is a controversial item. It'll be interesting to see what the court does in that case.
Right. I mean, and how, practically speaking, Manny, how could this move by these officers perhaps affect the fate of asylum seekers in the U.S.?
Well, depending on how the court would rule, you could have a scenario where the Trump administration is affirmed and is able to send even more asylum seekers back to Mexico. And then you would have 15,000 plus who knows how many more thousands waiting down there. If the courts would act in the other direction, then it puts the whole Remain in Mexico policy into question. The administration and Mexico might then have to rework the deal, but that, of course, remains to be seen.
All right, Manuel Bojorquez for us. Manny, thank you very much.
Thank you.